focusing on plant cell or animal cells in the last few lectures. Um, and most of the stuff I've been talking about is also true of animal cells, but there are some important differences that you should notice. So you'll notice that they both have nuclei. Plant cell has a nucleus. Animal cell has a nucleus as well as a nucleoli. Okay. They both have endoplasmic reticula. They both have ribosomes. They both have cytoskeletal elements within them. They each have cytosol, which is sort of the watery component within the cell. They each have mitochondria for creating energy. Both have plasma membranes. I suppose I should tackle this cytosol cytoplasm thing while I'm at it. By the way, I said I would do that in a few lectures, so I guess I'll do it right now. So cytoplasm is everything inside of the cell excluding what's inside of the nucleus. So it's everything inside the cell. It's all of these organelles that are in here. Okay, those are all cytoplasm. The cytosol is just the watery internal components of the cell, excluding those organelles. So cytosol is just kind of the stuff that all of your organelles are floating in. Okay. Cytosol is the watery part. Cytoplasm is everything inside the cell that isn't inside the nucleus. So cytoplasm is all of these organelles, and it is also the cytosol. So cytoplasm is organelles plus cytosol. Cytosol is just the watery parts. It's just the water inside the cell, the watery components, and some of the dissolved solutes within the cell. So I thought I would clear that one up. So again, cytoplasm is cytosol plus organelles. Cytosol is just the watery stuff inside the cell that your organelles float in. Okay. So anyway, back to what I was talking about. There are a lot of similarities between animal and plant cells. All of these organelles and cytoskeletal components are within both plant and animals, but there are differences between the two. So plant cells have cell walls. Animal cells do not have cell walls. Okay, so cell walls are mostly for the protection of plant cells. That is their principal function. They also limit water absorption, which we're going to talk about why that's important in chapter 5. But plant cells have cell walls. Animal cells do not have cell walls. So that's another good clue if you were looking at a cell. The first thing that you should be able to identify, is this a prokaryote or is this a eukaryote? If you find out that it is a eukaryote, because it has a nucleus, because it has membrane-bound organelles, the next thing maybe you should start looking for, is it plant or is it animal? And if it has a cell wall, it's an animal. Or I'm sorry, if it has a cell wall, it's a plant cell. Wow, that was a bad mistake. If it has a cell wall, it is a plant cell. Okay. If it has a central vacuole, it is a plant cell. Okay, the central vacuole is just going to be this watery region inside the center of the cell. It does a lot of different stuff for the plant cell. It helps it to store water. It helps it to store nutrients. It can be involved in metabolism. It can be involved in retaining wastes because if you have a cell wall, it can oftentimes be pretty difficult to get rid of some of that stuff. So like if you had a lysosome, it could just kind of take your wastes to the plasma membrane and eject them out into the extracellular space. It could get rid of all of those wastes. If you have a big wall around your cell, it can be a lot more difficult to store and degrade some of those wastes. And so you have the central vacuole, this big watery part inside the center of a cell. Okay. You also have these things called plastids, which you don't have in animal cells. The function of a plastid is to gather and store nutrients. And the principal one, the one that everybody kind of knows about, is photosynthesis, and that's coming in the form of chloroplasts. Okay, so those chloroplasts, those are going to be used in order to photosynthesize. So these are the main generalizable differences between plant and animal cells. Okay, Cell walls, okay, keeping that cell protected. Central vacuole, giving that cell a place to store water, giving that cell a place to store and degrade waste. And then you have plastids, which are going to help you to actually be able to create sugars that you can then turn around and use to create energy for yourself. So here's a nice generic picture of a plant cell that shows you some of the different things I was talking about. So again, here's your cell wall, giving this thing some structural support. Plant cells don't have that. It has a plasma membrane as well. Okay, it still has this plasma membrane, it's just inside of a cell wall. You also have this chloroplast here, which we're going to talk about in great detail in a few chapters, that is helping it to create sugars that the mitochondria can then use to create energy. And then here it has this central vacuole. It's got the central vacuole. All right, and again, you have a lot of the same components that you saw in a plant or in an animal cell. Plant and animal cells are very similar in a lot of ways, but they're very different in these important ways. Cell wall, chloroplast, central vacuole. Something I would know. I would know those three things are plant cells, and you don't see those in animal cells. So here is a plant cell wall, and this is a I'm not sure. I think this is a incense cedar, but that's not important. The main thing about this is that this is sort of dead cell walls, okay? This is dead cell walls that the plant cell uses to try and protect itself. And yeah, it's very well magnified. We'll probably take a look at some of these things when we do microscopes, because I think that's a good time to do it. But there you go. That is a picture of a cell wall. And before I get to this, I suppose I should also mention that those cell walls are composed of mostly cellulose. Okay, it is mostly cellulose, and in some cell walls, cellulose is joined by a compound called lignin, which makes it even stronger. Okay, and when you have this lignin, that it's typically what you see as wood or bark. All right, so cellulose, which is that polysaccharide, combined with lignin, gives you this bark. All right, so again, carbohydrates take many forms. Sometimes it's bread, sometimes it's bark. Anyway, so moving on to these plastids, here you have this chloroplast, which has some pretty interesting components to it, an inner and an outer membrane. Again, I'm not going to focus too much on the details of this. You should, however, know that chloroplasts are involved in the production of sugar, and they are involved in photosynthesizing energy from the sun to make that sugar. Interestingly, and you should probably know this as well, plants produce sugar, and they take in carbon dioxide, and they produce sugar and oxygen. But they're not just making sugars for fun. Plants are actually also taking those sugars and breaking them down as well. So plants they produce a lot more oxygen than they produce carbon dioxide. Plants are actually producing carbon dioxide in addition to oxygen. So here's just a list of some things that are within plant and animal cells, some structures. Okay, I probably won't do a full review reading of this. This is in your book. I highly recommend taking a peek at it. So the next section, the last section here of chapter 4 is cell-to-cell communication. I'm going to cut this off here and I'll do a short lecture on that.